Steelers at Bengals, Monday Night Football. Usually I ask Marco what he thinks. I'm taking the lead on this one. But actually I'm gonna give you the lead by asking you a question. What do you think of the Steelers this week compared to before the Saints game? How have you adjusted your power rankings?
I really haven't adjusted them one way or the other because to me, last week's game, Pittsburgh played well enough that they could have won that ball game. You were in a bad situation, a Sunday night game, on the road, at night, Halloween crowd, just party atmosphere. And
I heard an ESPN guy that was, I think it was the blogger for the AFC North, Walker's his last name, I think, said it was the loudest NFL game he's been at that year by far.
So, and let's face it, if Heath Miller doesn't fumble that one pass
6
play,
minutes left down on the 30.
That could be
down by 3.
Could be at worst, we're probably looking at a tie game there, and maybe the Steelers go in and take the lead. So, I think the game was what it was. But now coming to this week, you've got some added variables. Now they're in a second.
All right, but let's drill down on the take. Most of the viewers watching this have watched that game. I agree. I also think I think the Pittsburgh defense is awesome. Mm-hmm. I think that they're the best defense in the league by far. I think the one thing they're a little weak at, but they're not as weak as people think, is really in this league, no defense can handle a great passing offense clicking because of the new rules with the chucking and the way they're making it where it's defensive interference no matter what, pretty much, if there's any contact. I don't think when Drew Brees is playing well, any team can stop him. So I do think that Pittsburgh stops the run in a historic fashion. It's like, 7 or 14 rushes for 31 yards every week it seems to happen. I think their defense on passing might be the best or in top 5 for sure. It's just not quite as good. And I think Brees played an amazing game. I mean, it was an all-world game from 20-22 in the second half. And I'm not so sure that the idea, the Steelers are susceptible to the pass. I think maybe against Peyton Manning, maybe against Tom Brady, maybe against Drew Brees, and maybe only those guys. And I think only on the road, maybe. I mean, it was, like you said, the perfect storm to expose what is perceived as the Steelers' weakness. But I just think they're way, way above average at that instead of great.
I agree with you there. The point that I was going to lead into is that, and we talked about this in one of our earlier videos, Steelers are in a negative situation here this week, playing their third straight road game, and the fact that they catch no break where that road game is another national primetime game where you're going to have a pumped-up crowd.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I think that let me ask you this. Let's say the Steelers would have played almost identically. Heath Miller doesn't fumble. He's only fumbled 4 times in his career, or 3 times before that fumble in his career. Mm-hmm. All right? And he's 10 years in the league. Doesn't fumble, they win. But it's the same game other than that, meaning that they gave up all those passing yards and all that. Do you like Pittsburgh less or more if they had won the game?
If they had won the game, I actually like Pittsburgh more because they're not in a bounce-back mode. And I look at bounce back in a different way on the road when you're playing a bad team because people are going to they're stepping down in class. Public perception is going to be, okay, they lost to the Saints, but this week they got the Bengals, or as we like to refer to them, the Bungles. People are going to say they're dropping in class, they're going to bounce back.
So you're saying that building into the line right now is the bounce back?
Yes.
I'm not so sure I disagree that you're right. I'm saying, though, after reading, and again, the Steelers, as you can tell, and some of the terrible towels and stuff, that's my team, that's your team. I watch every play of every game. And I know, I'm starting to understand Tomlin's psychology. This is a team that's going to come out like gangbusters. And I'm thinking that whatever the bounce back premium is, it probably isn't enough. I also think that you can't lose sight of this. The Bengals beat the Steelers twice last year.
Well, a point that I was going to make, too, is 2 points. First off, when you have a division game, sometimes you got to throw out the nuts and bolts statistics that you have, because when teams know each other, they play twice a year, you know their weaknesses, you know their strengths, so you also know how to attack those and game plan better. So sometimes you'll see a result that's opposite what you would think mentally. I mean, how many times have you seen a Baltimore game where if you think Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right away you think, that's going to be a 16-13 game because of their great defenses. But because they know each other so well, they know where to find those spots, and they do things opposite, and you might end up getting a high-scoring game with them. I think the Bengals, they're not going anywhere this year. Again, this is probably their only TV game that they're going to be marquee. That crowd will be crazy. It's going to be a tough atmosphere for Pittsburgh.
What does that have to do with the fact that the Steelers have revenge?
It doesn't have the fact that the Steelers have revenge.
I listened very quietly. I've gotten some feedback. I interrupted you too much. All right, so that's what I'm saying. So let's agree the Steelers have revenge. So they're bouncing back from a tough loss. They have big-time revenge that these Bengals are beating them twice. Now, you're saying another point, which may or may not be valid, I tend to agree with you that you're probably right, is considering that Cincinnati almost has a lost cause this year, this is going to be like their bowl game. Mm-hmm. All right. But let me ask you this. One of your pet theories is the fact that right after a team loses the game, which makes their seasonal goal impossible, is the worst game they play, because mentally it's like, oh my God, it's like, I know a lot of guys that have had long-term relationships where they had a lot of trouble, but finally when the breakup really happens or the divorce happens, they are more depressed than they were, even though they haven't been happy with that person for 2 years. It's like, I'm divorced, right? But then usually 6 weeks later they're happy. but for that 6 weeks, they're not. Is the Bengals, if they would have won against the Dolphins, would have been in the playoff hunt. That Dolphins game was for the season. That was the talk. They lost. How can you not say they're going to be down?
Just the fact that it is the TV game. These guys, Monday Night Football, you listen to people when they talk, interviews on, the different shows, ESPN and that, they know that the world is watching them. Not only the fan base, but they know that on Monday night their peers are watching them too.
That seems to go against so many of your theories about motivation. What I always say is once you have max motivation, you can't be max plus. But you'll tell me times when there's, two teams playing for the national title, but some coach made a snide comment 3 years ago, and that means this team's going to be extra motivated. So I agree with you. The Bengals are going to be more motivated than if this was a Sunday game, but there has to be some diminishment in motivation because their season goal was made impossible or almost impossible after last week's loss.
You said it mathematically it's not ruled out, but it is virtually impossible. But one thing, and you got to admit, if your season is screwed, the last thing, and go back to your analogy about,
under that theory, the Cowboys would have stuck up against the Jags last week. Hey, we know we're out of the playoff.
But that's not the rivalry.
But the game was, but it's not a rivalry. But it was on national TV. It was still it was the number one. It was, sadly, with the number one feed on CBS at 1:00. I mean,
it's not the same as being the Monday night game and being a division game. You want to put the screws to the guys that are in your division. And really, as good as the Steelers started the season, if they take another loss here, it's gonna hurt them chasing Baltimore.
Which does not motivate the Steelers.
It does, but it also motivates Cincinnati to show up and play. And the one thing about Monday Night Football, we know the history about home dogs on Monday night, that it's been a long-term proposition, and this year it has been good as well. The home dogs have had a good year so far. There was more home dogs at the beginning of the season.
But just 2 weeks ago, you were saying because of that, the line's been adjusted, so you wanted to lay the favorite on Monday night.
I did, and we won that ball game.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is how does it go both ways?
Because this is one of those teams, the home team, that doesn't look attractive. They look like they are in total disarray, and the public will want the premium team.
How would you characterize the character? Again, we said that Dallas is a low character team. That's a generalization, but in aggregate, we believe that.
I agree.
Where would you put the Bengals on the character scale?
They're probably right behind them because they seem to go out and get some of the misfits and cast-offs that other teams don't want anymore.
So what you're telling me, I agree. I think they're bottom five character. You're telling me we got a bottom five character team. that lost the game that made their dream of the season impossible, which would be the playoffs in this case. They're playing the most physical, or one of the most physical teams in the NFL, and they got T.O., they got Chad Okocinco, or however you say his name, and you think they're going to say, oh, we're going to play our hardest because we want to screw the Steelers, and we're not going to pout because our season's in disarray. That's your thought.
I am not telling anybody to go out and bet the Bengals, but I'm also saying at this point in time I can't justify the Steelers because I think you're paying a premium for them this week. I think the line's a little high.
All right. I agree. You pay a premium for the Steelers every week, but sometimes that premium is going to be that the other factors go beyond that. I think you have clearly the best team in football. Vegas, even after the loss, has the Steelers as clearly, it's not even close. They're like a point better than...
I mean, anybody that watched the New Orleans game, coming away from that game, that was a good-looking loss. I mean, no loss is good, but that was as good of a loss looking-wise for the Steelers that they could have.
It's the first game since 2008 they lost by more than a touchdown. So if anything, it was, oh my God, it wasn't even a last-minute game. We got outplayed, especially in the second half. I mean, I would say that missed field goal, they could have, I mean, there's so many things they could have won that game. If Randall L. would have actually went into the end zone instead of crumpling up on the goal line, they score 7. If they make that field goal late, it's 13-0 at halftime. They're up. Instead, they only got 3, or I guess it'd be 10-0. They get 3. They miss the field goal. The Saints kick the field goal. It's 3-3. The Heath Miller fumble. This is the best team in football that not only has yearly revenge against an 0-2. You know, Bengals last year they went 0-2, which in Ohio, Big Ben, that just doesn't happen to him. I mean, they dominated the Ohio teams before that. And then you forget this is a rivalry. People that don't understand the geography, and it's Cincinnati, Ohio. These are teams that don't like each other. It's the perfect storm for a great well, let me ask you, and then we'll go. To me, it's a perfect storm for a great Pittsburgh performance. You know you got a good team. They're off a loss. They got revenge. They know if they lose, because of last year, you know if they lose, they're going to have trouble with the Bengals. They're already a half game behind because they lost straight up against them or head-to-head. This is a perfect storm for the Steelers to have a great performance. Other than the fact you're saying you think the Bengals, I'm not saying that you're wrong, the Bengals are going to play well. I think you're very wrong. But let's say that, let's set that to the side a minute. What is it that would make Pittsburgh not have an outstanding performance here?
There's nothing. Well, you've slipped over the 3 weeks in a row on the road. That is a big point.
Okay, and maybe that is. So the question is, and again, one of those, and that was traveling both times, to Miami,
right,
to New Orleans, right. Sunday night game, which sets you back 5 or 6 hours, which is like a half a day. You know, so maybe that is the one point, and again, that's what's nice when we take our time with these. That's the one point that causes me a little bit of pause.
And you always ask me about true line, fair line. Really, I thought this line should have been 3 in the game, and I think you're paying a premium because
but hold
of
on a
last week's
second. Pittsburgh was 3 at Miami. How in the heck are they going to be 3 at Cincinnati?
Well, a lot of people, looked at that Miami game, and that's a game is for all the reasons.
I'm not asking about how the game. Do you think Pittsburgh what was Pittsburgh's power ranking? Actually, we should have an overtime segment. We're almost at the 15-minute mark. I believe that the line's right, and again, and we can continue this in the comments section. But I believe if Miami was getting 3 against Pittsburgh, you got to be laying more to Cincinnati at this point. All right, thank you, Marco. Again, my official pick, and Dustin put it up there, is the Steelers to cover. And you can continue this conversation in the comment section with Marco and me. That's it for the videos this week. And next week, we're going to be up with the 8 biggest games and a video free pick on every one of them.